Good morning, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another edition of Lovin Daily. I am your host, Jonathan Cilia, joined by my co-host, Julian Bonici, and here are your headlines for today. Malta schools welcome back students for first time since COVID-19 shutdown. Poem penned by Sudanese migrant who died trying to reach Malta goes viral. Malta divided on Joseph Muscat's resignation. A farmer gets a 15th month sentence for animal abuse. Bernard Grech and Robert Abela face off for the first time, and stay tuned because right after Lovin Daily, we've got a very amazing and quite an interesting interview. Pepe Azzopardi will be interviewing former PN leader Adrian Delia for the first time since his leadership election last Saturday. It will be happening at 10:15 on Lovin Malta. Stay tuned right after Lovin Daily. I'm quite excited for this interview, Joe.
No, yes, I'm super excited. We're going to get to find out sort of what his political future is and what he sort of makes of his loss and his tenure as PN leader. I think it's going to be really interesting. So I'll catch that 10:15. To move on to our first story. So Malta state and religious schools today are welcoming back students for the first time since COVID-19 hit the island in March, April. They were meant to open last week, but this decision was postponed, was pushed back by a week or so because of a spike in numbers and to give teachers a bit of a time to get used to the new rules and regulations about schools reopening. Just so you're aware, there are some public health guidelines in place. This includes things like the number of students within a classroom, social distancing measures. Some are even introducing a bit of a staggered approach. And I think people still have the option, if they really want to pursue online learning. This comes at a time, at the end of the day, when there were actually some educators and some students who tested positive for the virus over the last week. It is very concerning. I think even the Union of Professional Educators sort of called for a shift back to online learning, but it seems that for now, both the government and Prime Minister Robert Abela seem to favor a physical presence in school. They say that, you can't sort of lose the education of a generation. It's very interesting. I tend to kind of agree myself because, I think we have to start moving. We don't know how long a vaccine is going to go on for. It's a very complex. What do you think about it?
I think obviously there's a lot of concerns, but I think we need to think about kind of what parents are going through right now. So I'm sure the parents are, scared if their kids are going to get COVID, if there's going to be an outbreak in the school. But we had a journalist appear outside independent schools when they opened last week. And we spoke to parents, and they're quite keen on getting back to normal in the sense of having schools reopen, be it with a class bubble, be it with whatever. Let's be clear, since April, March, kids have been at home, parents have to work, parents have a lot of things to do. Having a kid home for a week can be a headache. Having them for a month, I can't even imagine. Having them for 6, 7, 8 months straight must be a total nightmare. And it's not only them, Robert Abela himself, the Prime Minister, has made it clear that he's sending his daughter to school and he wants schools to reopen. And the Minister of Education, they had a representative, Frank Fabri, come over last week, spoke to us on Lovin Daily, and he made it clear that face-to-face education, you can't really beat it. It's essential for students' growth. So it seems like, yep, we're definitely moving ahead with the schools opening. Moving on to the second story, quite an important human interest story and something that might have fallen under the radar recently. So last month, 19th August, a ship capsized on the way to Europe, heading off the Libyan coast. It wasn't in Maltese waters, but it was heading towards Maltese waters. 82 people were on the ship, 45 died, 35 survived, but one of the persons that died, a Sudanese artist and poet by the name of Abdel Wahad Youssef, penned a poem that has since gone viral. This poem is quite heartbreaking. It's all about a migrant's experience crossing the water, crossing the sea, trying to find a better life. In fact, the opening lines are, "You'll die at sea, your head rocked by the roaring waves." And unfortunately, that is how Youssef died himself. So this poem is now going viral online. It's been shared over 11,000 times. Did you read the poem? What did you make of it?
Yes, I did read the poem. I think it's really touching. I think it brings out this important human element to this migration crisis, which we often just reduce to just numbers and statistics. I think it's important to read a poem like this. Wherever you stand in the debate, you can be on one side or the other. I just think it's important to read it so we understand a bit more that there are human lives at stake over here, So just carte blanche approaches to this is not going to work. Human lives are at stake. Let's make sure we take care of that.
You can find the poem in full on lovinmalta.com.
To move on to our next story, so Malta is divided, it seems, by former Prime Minister Joseph Muscat's resignation from Parliament. So I guess it was a post, an article you wrote yesterday, but sort of detailing how posts on social media show how Joseph Muscat was beloved, hated in equal measure, he was celebrated, but then people were, treating him with derision on his resignation. He's a very interesting analysis in Malta. There were some funny posts. On one hand, you have Roberta Metsola sharing the post of when she infamously refused his handshake, but then you have cabinet members praising Joseph Muscat as an agent of change, despite all the corruption allegations and the issues surrounding the Caruana Galizia case. There were even some funny debates on proposals Joseph Muscat introduced. You had former MEP candidate Felix Busuttil sort of saying, the liberals in Malta sort of are indebted to Joseph Muscat for introducing so many civil rights. Then members of the LGBTQ community came out and sort of said, listen, it was activists' hard work who managed to achieve that, not Joseph Muscat. At the end of the day, showing just how divided he really is.
And I mean, obviously, we saw his administration fail spectacularly last December, one of the craziest political crises that Malta's ever seen. Since then, he's kind of been, laid low, been quiet, but clearly Maltese people still have a lot of emotions related to Joseph Muscat. I mean, I don't know about you, but after the resignation from Parliament earlier this week, my feeling was literally just people celebrating his departure, saying finally about time, and you should be going to prison next. And then I had other people, heartbroken, saying, well, you'll always be in our hearts, we'll never forget you. So totally two ends of the spectrum over this one man. And there were some very extra reactions, let me say, yesterday. I mean, I don't know if you saw it, but controversial Mosta priest, Father David Muscat, live streamed for an hour and 12 minutes from a chapel, camera facing towards the Madonna and the altar, and he was saying the rosary, saying all these prayers, thanking God for getting rid of Joseph Muscat finally from Parliament. Very controversial post. It got a lot of backlash. Even the Mosta mayor even kind of condemned it as well. But it just goes to show just how strongly some people still feel, most people still feel about Joseph Muscat.
And that's not all the news we had on Joseph Muscat. Yesterday in the evening he appeared on one TV show, Piazza, hosted by Carl Stani-Navarra, where he sort of outlined some proposals that he would like to see. So he actually proposed maybe an underground road from Melleja to Valletta to help obviously address the traffic issue. He completely backed the Gozo tunnel and the Central Link once again, and maybe gave a hint that there could possibly be a debate surrounding abortion in Malta in the future. All really big issues. You can read about it on lovinmalta.com. Just let us know what you think about them in the comments below.
Moving on to the next story, a bit of a tragic story coming out of Zebuj. And it seems like we keep seeing these stories week in, week out, Julian. So I don't know what's happening here, but yes, a Zebuj farmer was sentenced to 15 months imprisonment for being found guilty of animal abuse, animal neglect. In this shocking case, and there's footage, there's images of these dogs. You can see everything on lovinmalta.com. Just warning, they are a little bit graphic. But these dogs were found starving, tied up in their own feces. Some of them allegedly tied up for 3 months, kept in dark rooms. It wasn't just dogs, hedgehogs, birds, roosters as well. This is just another case of animal neglect that we keep seeing. A few weeks ago we wrote an opinion piece about animal welfare, how they need to step up. But it seems like it's not just animal welfare. I think even the people are themselves. I mean, when we see farmers doing this, and these are people who work with animals day in, day out, you get to wondering, like, how can they think it's okay to tie up dogs for so long, leave them in their own feces? I don't know what you think about this, Julian.
No, yeah, another horrific case of animal abuse. I mean, it's good to see the authorities intervening. I mean, on one hand, but then on the other hand, you'd wish maybe they could send a stronger message. I mean, 15 months imprisonment, like you said, is very long, but not as long as maybe it should be. What concerns me more than anything is that there's no maybe follow through on these laws. So there's no outright ban on someone owning all types of animals once they've committed an act of animal abuse like this. So this guy in 15 months will be out of prison and he can go get any animal he wants. There are some laws in place. I do believe sometimes they do ban the owning of dogs and the licensing of dogs. but there's still a lot of loopholes in there to protect, animals in the country. To move on to our final story, so Bernard Grech and Prime Minister Robert Abela met for the first time ever since Grech was elected as PN leader. Unsurprisingly, it seems that the meeting between the two political opponents was a bit tense. They didn't agree on much things. Grech told the press after the meeting that Abela was just going on monologues without listening to his proposals. Grech is proposing for a public inquiry into the electrogas deal, which he says is corrupt. For those of you who don't remember, it's linked to Jorgen Fenech and the Caruana Galizia case. And he is also calling for a national conference on migration. On that migration point, Grech sort of said that Abela just is talking about irregular migration without focusing on regular migration, when he says really the influx on foreigners is off the back of Labour Party's economic policy in the country. Grech has other issues to deal with though elsewhere. He's actually facing a kind of an exodus, no, John?
A little bit. So obviously over the weekend we reported how some councillors had resigned from the Nationalist Party following last Saturday's election. But it's not just councillors. Popular Maltese personality and social media influencer Terry Tabormla, as she's known, a lifelong PN supporter, oftentimes talking about the PN and her love for the PN and the Nationalist Party in her videos, has left the PN. Yesterday she uploaded a photo with the PL president, actually meeting her, and she uploaded a photo in a red dress as well, which people were sharing. Obviously Labour supporters were loving it. I'm sure PN supporters weren't that happy with that, because at the end of the day she is a little bit of an influencer. Not only that, but very surprisingly, Bernard Grech actually called her. This is a bit of an interesting support, because I'm wondering if he called the councillors. But apparently he called her, but she said that wasn't enough to bring her back. She said she did not hate the man, but that she would not be returning to the Nationalist Party. So a bit of an exodus there.
Yes, a bit of an exodus, but we actually ran a story showing maybe the other side of it. So we ran a story with some comments from Herman Scavone, who was actually a long time ally to Adrian Dalia, but turned out to be one of the 17 MPs who voted against him in a confidence vote, sort of triggering off this entire crisis to begin with. He explained, it was a hard decision, he really liked Adrian Dalia, but unfortunately he had to accept that, Dalia was failing to make any ground despite the corruption allegations, despite the work he was doing, and he feared that the PN was simply going to yet another devastating general election result. So for those of you who haven't forgotten, basically after the show, Adrian Dalia is being interviewed by Sharabank, aired exclusively on Lovin Malta. It's going to be a really interesting interview, a lot of details in there. Be sure to follow.
Yeah, stay tuned. It's literally happening in a few minutes, guys, right after this show. So you'll catch it on Lovin Malta's Facebook page. On that note, both from myself and Julian, have a day full of lovin'.